In American Gardens, we explore a Long Island estate with an unusual 100-year-old Sargent's weeping hemlock. It's almost 3 times as wide as it is tall. The views are hard to beat at Longview in New Orleans, Louisiana. And one of America's best-known architects, Frank Lloyd Wright, is the inspiration behind this garden in Madison, Wisconsin. It's all coming up on Great American Gardens. Hello, welcome to Great American Gardens. I'm Tricia Springer. Native Americans once called the North Shore of Long Island their planting fields. That name lives on at the Planting Fields Arboretum. Today, the Arboretum's bountiful gardens are living proof that this area of the Northeast has been appropriately named. In the early 20th century, the North Shore of New York's Long Island changed from humble farmland to millionaire estates. Planting Fields Arboretum State Historic Park is one of the few remaining estates from that era, when the North Shore became known as the Gold Coast.
The real draw for the public is to really, for the first time, see a fully intact Gold Coast estate. Much like the Roaring Twenties, and where that money was spent and how people lived.
At Planting Fields Arboretum, the first large tree to move cross-country is a towering story of love. And a wife's favorite spot for tea still has its old charm. Spanning more than 400 acres, the Planting Fields Arboretum contains some of Long Island's last remaining open space. In the midst of suburbia, this pocket of nature still has the power to awe.
The best thing about working on the grounds at Planting Fields is the changes in the landscape from hour to hour. The shadowing on the trees, the colors, the wildlife.
The Matinecock Indians once grew corn in this part of Long Island, a fertile land they called their planting fields. Businessman William Coe and his wife May borrowed the name when they first bought this estate in 1913. William Coe hired prominent landscape architects, including Olmsted Brothers, the firm founded by Central Park designer Frederick Law Olmsted. In 1949, Coe donated his estate to the people of New York State. And in 1992, the Planting Fields Arboretum became New York's first state historic park. At Planting Fields, William Coe replanted the scenery of his English childhood, and to this day the Great Lawn evokes an Old English park.
It took many sticks of dynamite, removal of a lot of boulders, but he was able to recreate England right here at Planting Fields in Oyster Bay.
The Great Lawn is also the setting for one of Mrs. Coe's childhood memories, the Fairhaven beech tree. The beech tree came from May's ancestral home in Fairhaven, Massachusetts. As a gesture of love, Mr. Coe had the then 30-ton tree moved from Massachusetts by ship, something unheard of back in 1915. The voyage across Long Island Sound to Oyster Bay was about 150 miles.
It set the stage for actually modern transplantation of large trees, which had never been done before. And it took 2.5 weeks to cross the Sound, bring the tree up, which was 30 feet at the time, bring it up by a team of horses 2.5 miles from the harbor up here to Planting Fields.
At about 80 feet high today, the tree towers over the historic Coe Hall. Another living sculpture is the 100-year-old Sargent's weeping hemlock. This mountain of melting branches is a rare mutation of a hemlock's typical pyramid shape. It's the largest sergeant's weeping hemlock on Long Island, at 16 feet tall by 47 feet wide. While planting fields' grand old trees provide shady places to relax, May Coe's favorite place to relax was in front of this tea house, looking into the Italian blue pool garden.
Every afternoon, she would have tea, or whatever, at the tea house between 3 and 4.
The Italian blue pool garden blends the old-fashioned charm of aging brick with the vivacious colors of new flowers. Among them are the yellows and reds of dwarf straw flowers and summer poinsettias. While this historic park respects history, it's not entirely rooted in the past.
We're standing here in the Dahlia Garden, which is our newest and one of our most popular features here at Planting Fields, originally the site of the Coe's vegetable garden.
Although the Coes never grew dahlias here, they always wanted the newest and best of everything. This garden is definitely in keeping with that philosophy. Among the latest dahlia hybrids, the Corb Peachy II and the Fern Ridge Fancy are in-your-face gorgeous, popping up 5 to 6 feet to greet visitors. The Dahlia Garden is one of many ways Planting Fields celebrates the splendor of Long Island's Gold Coast, where a couple once planted the landscapes and trees of their childhood and the gardens of their dreams. At the Planting Fields Arboretum, the opulent landscapes of the Roaring '20s roar on into the 21st century. When Great American Gardens returns, a garden so grand the house was rebuilt to improve the view. We'll visit Longview in Louisiana when we continue our tour. Welcome back to Great American Gardens. Most people build their gardens around their homes, but in the case of this next public garden in Louisiana, the home was built to fit the garden. In 1939, the homeowners built the new home so they could enjoy their New Orleans garden from almost every room. Longview. The name alone evokes images of expansive vistas. While this New Orleans estate offers charm on a grand scale, it's also intimate and sweet.
Longview is a little treasure, a little gem that's hidden away in this neighborhood.
Among the gems within this treasure chest is a flower that changes color as it ages. A garden completely dressed in yellow. And a flower that seems to fly like a butterfly. The 12 gardens on this 8-acre estate can be enjoyed while strolling outside or from the inside while looking through the windows of the mansion. But this home didn't always feature a room with a view. When Edgar and Edith Stern first bought the property in 1921, they built a large colonial-style house. Edgar was a rich cotton broker, and Edith's father was the head of Sears Roebuck and Company. The Sterns wanted formal gardens around their estate like those they had seen during their tours of Europe. They hired Ellen Biddle Shipman, a well-known landscape architect who had designed gardens for some of America's most prominent families, the Rockefellers and DuPonts. As Shipman's design began to take root, the Sterns realized that the location of their home and its limited windows did not do justice to these stunning new gardens. So they took the drastic step of moving the old house off the property and building a new home that took advantage of the lovely views.
And the gardens and the house are they really need to be seen as one experience. When you're inside the house and you look out in the gardens just draw you outside.
One of the best examples of the inside and outside working in harmony is the Pan Garden, named for the small fountain which features the mythical flute player Pan. This enchanting garden acts as an extension of the dining room.
Oftentimes they had their breakfast out here or a quiet luncheon, and in the evenings they'd stroll out into the gardens to enjoy their cocktails.
The Pan Garden reflects Shipman's preference for subtle tones over showy colors. White asters and impatiens provide a gentle background, along with an unusual flower that changes shade day by day.
This is a plant that probably elicits most comments from our visitors here at Longview. It's called Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. And what happens here is the bloom opens this lovely periwinkle blue. The second day it fades to lavender, and the third day it fades to white here and then basically disappears.
The walls enclosing the garden provide privacy, one of the cornerstones of Shipman's design philosophy.
It was an important idea for Mrs. Shipman to have every garden be a separate experience.
Shipman's handiwork remains strong throughout the estate. The Goldfish Pond garden reveals her love of water and lush greenery. Here Adam and Eve lay entwined on a bed of ferns, while a sculpture of a girl dances joyfully nearby. Further down the garden path, visitors can enjoy the geometric patterns of the walled garden. Even though this is a traditional kitchen garden stocked with herbs and vegetables, it too reveals Shipman's touch, for every bed bursts with foliage. Mrs. Stern tried her hand at designing as well. Inspired by the monochromatic gardens she saw in Europe, she planted a garden in front of the guest house that featured her favorite color. Swirling angel's trumpet, sweet olive trees, and shrimp plants show off the many moods of yellow, including the vivacious butterfly vine covering the breezeway.
One of the real signature plants in the garden is the butterfly vine, which is a tropical vine that is used all over New Orleans. Produces beautiful yellow flowers, and then the flowers turn into seed pods that flitter down and look very much like butterflies as they're falling to the ground.
Whether delicate as a butterfly's wing or powerful as the live oaks lining the entrance to the mansion, the views of Longview are spectacular at every turn and worth building a house around. Did you know there's a garden in Wisconsin that imitates the designs of famous architect Frank Lloyd Wright? Next, on our tour of Great American Gardens. Welcome back to Great American Gardens. Frank Lloyd Wright is best known for his architecture, but he's also had an important influence on American landscape design. At Olbrich Botanical Gardens in Madison, Wisconsin, landscapers have used Wright's prairie style to create an open, natural, and uniquely American atmosphere. In Madison, Wisconsin, downtown buildings blend harmoniously with the natural curves of Lake Monona. Similarly, just a few minutes away at the Olbrich Botanical Gardens, the part played by human hands is made subtle by the use of organic designs.
It inspires me. It awakens me to the possibilities of gardening in Wisconsin. It makes me think that old ideas aren't just set, that we can try new things.
At Olbrich, designers have blended nature and geometry to evoke the style of early 20th century American architect Frank Lloyd Wright. Frank Lloyd Wright's prairie style can be seen in a variety of ways throughout the gardens. The local stone, which gives both the gardens and the visitors center an organic look. The constant sound of water, which draws people into the scenery. and towering plants, which immerse visitors in a natural experience. This 13-acre prairie-style landscape is very accessible to the public. It's close to downtown, it's free, and the gardens are easy to navigate because they're arranged like the spokes of a wheel around a central lawn. Back in the early 1900s, this property was anything but a beautiful garden.
It's a wonderful story about Olbrich that it really was a terribly abused piece of property. It was a swamp that had been dumped on regularly by a local factory. And so a lot of the local residents remember it fondly as the swamp and the dump at the end of Lake Monona.
Madison attorney Michael Olbrich changed that. Concerned about rapid urban development, Olbrich bought property along Lake Monona, which he then sold to the city at cost to create a park with flower gardens. The public park was created in 1921, and in 1952, Olbrich's dream of botanical gardens became a reality. Today, the gardens weave man-made structures and their surroundings into one natural fabric.
Here at Olbrich, we have this sort of prairie-style architecture that you see in the horizontal lines of the building and the organic stone elements. It's a native limestone that we repeat in the buildings and in garden structures.
In the Great Arbor, hardy kiwi and Kentucky wisteria vines twine through panels which reflect Wright's architectural style.
The panels that make up the arbor that support the vines that are growing on it are divided up into small lights, if you will, like a typical Frank Lloyd Wright stained glass window.
The path out of the arbor leads easily to the sunken garden. The pool's long horizontal lines are made with the same locally quarried limestone as the visitors center. This prairie style blends well with elements of a formal English garden.
It's very symmetrical. If there's a plant on the left side, typically the same plant is on the right side of the garden.
Hydrangea is echoed on both sides of the flower beds, while water lilies march down both sides of the pool. Water is an organic element used frequently by Frank Lloyd Wright and throughout Olbrich to draw people more deeply into a natural experience. In the perennial garden, a 200-foot stream tumbles among locally found rocks, inviting visitors to step right into the scenery.
People love water, and they love to get their hands and feet in it and everything. So when we've designed our new gardens, we've let people get up to the water, let them get their hands and fingers in it, and it's really a fun element in the garden, I think.
The perennial garden also uses winding paths with towering flowers and grasses to give visitors the feeling they are truly within the garden.
My favorite thing about the perennial garden is the wonderful height of the grasses and the shrubs and the way that they make the views appear and reappear, and the colors draw you through the garden and almost play a little hide and seek with you as you're moving along.
Frank Lloyd Wright's prairie style gives Olbrich a uniquely American look, using the organic elements of stone and water, and creating a harmony between simple geometry and natural vistas. At Olbrich Botanical Gardens, visitors are immersed in scenery which blends human creativity with nature's own subtle artistry. Next, we'll make a return trip to Olbrich Botanical Gardens in Wisconsin, where the water in the reflecting pools is turned black on purpose. We'll find out why when Great American Gardens continues. Welcome back to Great American Gardens. Garden pools and fountains filled with black water might sound like an ugly idea, but they actually add a dark beauty to the Olbrich Botanical Gardens. In the Olbrich sunken garden, the reflecting pool is like a mirror. The reflections of the surrounding garden are near perfect, thanks to something extra added to the water.
The water is dyed black with a distilled sugar beet solution, and it does two things. It shades the water to keep the algae from growing, and it also provides a reflective surface so that you can see the wonderful reflections of plants and other architectural features in the garden.
The reason the black color prevents algae is that sunlight cannot penetrate the dark water. Without sunlight, algae can't grow. The sugar beet solution is also non-toxic, so it's safe for the small animals and people that come in contact with the water, an important consideration in a public garden. Thanks for joining us on our tour of Great American Gardens, and remember, public gardens are your gardens.